The storm came without warning. One moment the stars were calm. The next moment fire tore across the black sky. The human ship shook like a toy in the hand of a giant. Metal screamed and alarm shouted louder than his own heart. When the crash finally ended, silence pressed against his ears. He was alive, but alone. His name was Daniel. An engineer, not a soldier, not a hero. Only a man who fixed machines. Now he stood on a strange world of glowing blue stone and forests that whispered in voices not his own. The air was heavy with silver mist. Shadows moved even when the trees stood still. He felt eyes watching him, but he could not see who or what they belonged to. Every step forward was fear. Every sound behind him was threat. He carried nothing but a small tool belt, and in his hand he gripped a broken pipe like a weapon. He knew it would not save him, but holding it gave him courage. The ground shook, a low hum rose from the mist, and then he saw it, a city of towers made from crystal. Glowing in colors his eyes could barely understand, alien figures moved along bridges of light, their shapes tall, elegant, and terrifying. Daniel wanted to run, but there was nowhere to run. 2 guards in silver armor spotted him, their faces hidden by masks that glowed with sharp lines of red. They raised long spears that hummed with energy, and their language came like knives, sharp and fast. Daniel could not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. Intruder, enemy, stranger. His throat went dry, his heart pounded. He slowly raised his empty hand, and then without thinking he bowed. It was not a deep bow, only a simple human gesture of respect. He did not know why he did it. Perhaps fear, perhaps instinct. The guards froze, confused. Aliens did not bow to them, never. In the silence that followed, a new figure appeared. She stepped from the crystal stairs with light around her like a crown. Her eyes glowed like silver water. Her hair shimmered as if the night sky had been caught in motion. Every guard lowered their head when she walked. This was no ordinary alien. This was the princess. She looked at Daniel, not with anger, not with fear, but with curiosity. Her lips parted, and her voice was soft yet strong. He bows, she said in her language, and though Daniel could not understand, something in her tone felt gentle. The guards hesitated, unsure whether to strike or to obey. Daniel kept his head low, his hand shaking, his knees weak. He whispered to himself, "Please don't kill me. I mean no harm." Though the aliens did not understand his words, the sound of his voice carried honesty. The princess raised her hand, stopping the guards. "Bring him," she commanded. The guards looked at one another in shock. A human, captured, not killed. This had never happened before. Daniel was surrounded and pushed toward the shining palace. The ground itself seemed alive, glowing where he walked. Crowds of aliens gathered to stare at him, their eyes cold, their mouths whispering with disgust. To them he was an insect, an intruder, unworthy of their presence. But the princess's gaze did not leave him. There was no hatred in her eyes, only strange interest. Inside the great hall, thousands of crystals reflected light like fire on water. Alien nobles stood on high steps, their robes like living shadows, their voices heavy with judgment. The king himself sat on a throne of black stone, his face stern, his crown like sharp blades of iron. When his gaze fell upon Daniel, the hall grew silent. Here stood the most powerful ruler of this world, and he saw only a weak human. "Why is this creature alive?" The king's voice thundered. The guards flinched. The nobles shouted for death. Daniel shook, his legs almost gave way. He knew one word from the king could end his life. But before the order could be spoken, the princess stepped forward. "Because he showed respect," she said. Her voice clear. The hall went silent again. Nobles gasped, some laughed, some shouted in anger. "A bow from a human means nothing," one lord growled. But the princess stood tall, her eyes shining. "It means everything. It means he understands what others do not." Respect. Daniel did not understand the words, but he felt the weight of her voice. He looked up and saw her watching him with something strange in her eyes. Hope. He lowered his head again, repeating the simple bow, and the hall trembled with the sound of angry voices. The king's fist struck the arm of his throne. Silence returned. He leaned forward, his eyes dark and filled with warning. "Then let him live for now," he said. The crowd roared with outrage, but the princess smiled faintly. Daniel did not know what had happened or why. He only knew that his life had been spared, by one small gesture, a bow, and by the choice of a princess who saw something in him that no one else did. But he also knew the danger had only begun. for every eye in that hall now saw him not as harmless, but as a threat, and in the shadows of the alien court, whispers began to rise. The human had bowed, the princess had smiled, and the balance of power had shifted. This simple act would change everything. The crystal hall was still trembling with voices. Whispers ran across the floor like snakes, winding from noble to noble, from soldier to soldier. Every alien eye burned with anger at the sight of a human standing alive inside the sacred court. To them it was insult, a crime against their pride. The king's voice was final but not calm. He lives, for now. That single command did not save Daniel. It only changed his death from quick to slow. Now every noble, every rival, every ambitious warrior had reason to see him fall. Daniel stood in the middle of the hall, his knees shaking, his chest heavy with fear. He did not understand their words, but he understood their faces, the sneers, the disgust. The sharp teeth shone in cold smiles. He felt smaller than a child, lost among giants who wanted him gone. The guard shoved him forward until he stood near the princess. She stood tall, her silver eyes calm, her hands folded like water in still air. When the hall shouted for blood, she did not flinch. Daniel saw her as a light in a storm, though he did not know why she risked herself for him. A noble with robes like fire stepped forward. His voice cracked the air, sharp and cruel. "Princess, you insult our people, this creature bows and you call it respect? A worm can bend, does that make it worthy of your protection?" The court laughed like blades scraping on stone. The princess raised her chin, her voice soft yet cutting. "Respect is not in blood, not in power, it is in choice. He chose, none of you would." The noble hissed with rage, his eyes flashing red, but the king's hand silenced him. The throne hall returned to heavy silence. Daniel's heart raced. He could not understand the language, yet he felt the danger. It pressed on his chest like a weight. The way the noble stared told him everything. He was not a guest. He was prey in a cage full of hunters. The king's voice rolled across the hall again, deep as thunder. "If this human is to stand here, then let him prove his worth," the nobles cheered. Voices rising like a storm, Daniel frowned, confused. But the tone of their cheer chilled his blood. The princess looked at her father, her voice sharp. "He is no warrior. He is not trained for your games." But the king's eyes narrowed. "Then he will die, and your mercy will mean nothing." The hall echoed with laughter and cruel joy. Daniel's chest tightened, though he did not know the words. He knew the truth. They wanted him tested, they wanted him broken. His survival in the crash was not enough. His bow was not enough, now they wanted blood. The guards dragged him through crystal corridors, the floor glowing beneath his steps. Aliens gathered, their whispers rising like fire. Children pointed at him. Soldiers laughed, nobles glared everywhere he went. He was a walking insult to their empire. Finally, they pushed him into a chamber of light. The ceiling stretched high. Banners of strange symbols hung heavy in the air. Rows of nobles watched from carved seats, their eyes sharp and unblinking. This was no simple hall. It was the trial chamber. Daniel stood alone in the center, his broken pipe still in his hand. The guards had taken everything else, leaving him with only scraps of courage. Above him, a crystal gong rang like thunder. Shaking the air, the trial had begun. A gate opened. Shadows moved inside. Daniel's breath caught when the creature stepped out. It was tall as two men, its skin black and wet like stone after rain. Its mouth stretched wide, lined with glowing fangs. Its eyes burned with yellow fire. The crowd cheered with hunger for blood. Daniel's knees weakened. His pipe felt like nothing against the monster. The creature hissed, stepping closer, the floor shuddering under its weight. He wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. Only walls and hungry eyes watching. The princess sat above, her face calm but her eyes full of fear. She whispered words Daniel could not hear, but he felt her gaze on him. Something in her stare told him, "Fight. Do not give up." The beast lunged, claws cutting the air. Daniel rolled aside, heart hammering. Dust filling his lungs, the crowd roared in laughter, calling him coward. But he had no armor, no weapon, only his wits. He remembered training drills from long ago. Not combat drills, but safety ones. When machines fell, when fires spread, when pipes broke, he remembered. Survive with the tools you have. Think, adapt, do not meet power with power. The beast lunged again. Daniel swung his pipe at its leg. Not to hurt, but to distract. The beast stumbled, slipped on the glowing floor, crashed into a wall with a deafening roar. The nobles gasped. Their laughter stopped for one breath. Daniel's chest heaved, his arms shook, but his mind sparked with hope. He could not kill it with strength, but maybe, just maybe, he could outsmart it. Above, the princess leaned forward, her silver eyes shining. For the first time, she smiled. She had seen what the others missed. This human was not strong, but clever, and sometimes clever was more dangerous than any blade. The beast rose again, angrier than before. The trial was far from over, but the court had seen enough to understand. This human was not ordinary prey. The chamber still echoed with the beast's roar. Daniel stood shaking, his pipe bent, his body weak. Yet somehow still alive, the nobles whispered in confusion, their laughter fading into silence. This human had survived longer than they expected. Too long for comfort. The king raised his hand, and the trial ended. The beast was pulled back into its cage. Still snarling, still hungry, guards grabbed Daniel, dragging him across the glowing floor. The crowd shouted with mixed voices, some angry, some curious, some strangely respectful. High above, the princess watched every step, her silver eyes never leaving the human. When she saw him stumble, she rose from her seat, her voice firm. "Bring him to me." The nobles gasped at her demand. The king's jaw tightened, but he gave no command to stop her for now. The human's fate was in her hands. The guards led Daniel into quiet chambers behind the court. The walls here glowed soft blue, the air cool, filled with the scent of strange flowers. For the first time since the crash, Daniel was not surrounded by hostile eyes, but he was not free either. Chains of suspicion still wrapped around him. The princess entered, her steps light, her presence calm. Without her crown and heavy robes, she looked less like a goddess and more like a young woman. Still, power clung to her like a second skin. She stopped in front of him, her voice low. "You are not like the others," Daniel blinked. Confused, he could not understand her words, but the tone reached him, soft yet strong. She saw the question in his eyes and smiled faintly. Her hand brushed across a crystal table, activating glowing symbols. Suddenly a device hummed, and her next words came in broken English. "You bow. Respect," she said slowly, the machine translating her language. Daniel's eyes widened. "You can understand me?" The translation stuttered but carried the meaning. The princess tilted her head, studying him. Not much, but enough. For the first time, Daniel felt hope. He stepped forward, his voice shaking. Why save me?" The princess's silver gaze softened. "Because no one bows to me, not truly. They bow to power, to crown, not to me's." Her words struck Daniel like a hidden truth. She was a princess, surrounded by respect, yet starved of real kindness. Daniel had bowed without knowing her title, without fear of politics, a small gesture, yet one that pierced her lonely world. She moved closer, her eyes never leaving his. All suitors, warriors, nobles, they see only throne, not heart. She touched her chest lightly. "You looked at me, like person, not prize." Daniel's throat tightened. He had never thought of himself as special, yet here, in this alien palace, his simple manners had become rare treasure. He gave a small, nervous smile, and for the first time she smiled back. Hours passed as they spoke through the machine. Daniel taught her simple human words. "Water, friend." "Thank you," she repeated them, her voice soft, her smile growing with each attempt. In return, she taught him alien phrases. Shara, meaning hope, Vera, meaning light. And when she whispered her own name, it carried a weight that made him forget the fear in his chest. But beyond the chamber walls, danger grew. Spies whispered through corridors. Guards listened behind doors. Rumors spread like fire in dry grass. "The princess protects the human," they hissed. "She speaks with him in secret." Nobles gathered in dark corners, their voices dripping with venom. "This human is a trick, a disease. He must be removed." Some feared the princess's heart. Others feared the symbol she was creating. A human treated as equal. What would that mean for their empire? That night, Daniel sat near the crystal window, watching the alien sky. Stars shimmered, but none looked like home. The princess joined him, her robe flowing like liquid silver. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then she whispered through the machine, "Do you miss your world?" Daniel's chest tightened. Images of Earth filled his mind, green fields, blue oceans, the sound of laughter. "Yes," he said softly. "Every second." The princess lowered her eyes, her voice faint. "I envy you. A place where you are free, not chained by crown, not trapped by duty." Their eyes met, and in that moment, the human and the princess understood one another. Two lives from different worlds, both prisoners in their own way. But together they found a piece of freedom. Yet freedom always has a price. Outside the chamber, a shadow moved, a spy slipping into the dark. His eyes burned with hate, his ears full of secrets. He carried a message for the king, a whisper that would ignite fire across the court. Daniel turned back to the princess, his voice steady though his heart was not. Why do I feel like something worse is coming? The princess's silver eyes darkened, as if she already knew the answer. Because it is, she whispered, and in that fragile moment of trust, neither of them saw the blade hidden in the shadows. Waiting for night, waiting for silence, waiting for the human who had dared to bow. The night was restless in the palace. Shadows crept across the halls. Whispers of betrayal ran through every corner. The nobles sharpened their schemes, and the king's silence grew heavier. Daniel did not know what they planned, but the princess did. She could feel the storm building around them at sunrise. The great crystal gong rang through the city. Its sound rolled like thunder, summoning every noble, every soldier, every citizen. The princess's chamber door opened. Guards entered, and their faces were like stone. By order of the king, one spoke. The human face's trial by fire. Daniel's chest tightened. He looked at the princess, but she could not stop them. Her father's word was law. Her voice powerless in front of the court. She wanted to shout, but she knew the king had already decided. If Daniel survived, he might gain respect. If he died, he would be forgotten. Either way, the king won. The trial ground was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. A vast arena carved into black stone, its walls glowing with fire trapped inside crystal veins. The air smelled of smoke and iron. The crowd above roared with excitement. To them, this was not punishment, this was entertainment. Daniel stood in the center, unarmed, his clothes torn from the crash above him. Banners of alien houses waved in the hot wind. The nobles sat high, their jeweled eyes fixed on him like hawks watching prey. And in the highest seat, the king sat with his crown of iron. Beside him, the princess clenched her hands, her face pale but her eyes sharp with fear. A gong struck again, and a deep rumble shook the ground. From hidden gates, cages opened. The first beast crawled out, its body covered in scales that shimmered like fire. Its breath hissed smoke, its claws sharp enough to cut stone. The crowd roared with hunger for blood. Daniel's heart pounded. His throat dry, he searched the ground, his eyes desperate. He could not fight strength with strength. He needed something else. His eyes found broken chains lying in the dust, left behind from older trials. He snatched one up, wrapping it around his arm like a whip. The beast lunged, its roar splitting the air. Daniel rolled aside, the chain snapped across its face, sparks flying from its scales. The crowd gasped, some cheered, others shouted in rage. This was no weak prey. This human had teeth of his own, but the king was not satisfied. He raised his hand, and another gate opened. A second beast charged out. This one with skin like black glass, its eyes burned red, and fire leaked from cracks along its body. The arena shook as both monsters circled Daniel. The princess rose from her seat, her voice sharp. Father, this is not a trial. This is execution. The king's eyes never left the arena. If he is weak, he dies. If he is strong, he earns his place. Let the flames decide. Daniel's lungs burned in the hot air. Sweat dripped down his face. He swung the chain at the first beast, then ducked as the second clawed at him. Dust filled his eyes, heat pressed against his skin. His legs ached, his arms trembled, but his mind kept racing. He remembered Earth's lessons. Machines break. Fires spread, but every system has a weakness. He noticed the cracks in the black beast's body, glowing brighter with every move. It was strong but unstable, its fire ready to burst. He darted between the monsters, baiting one into striking the other. The crowd gasped as claws clashed, sparks flying. The two beasts snarled at one another. Daniel swung the chain, wrapping it around a crystal spike jutting from the ground. He pulled hard, toppling the spike into the glowing cracks of the black beast. The ground shook. Fire exploded. The beast howled and collapsed in smoke. The crowd erupted in chaos, some furious, some cheering. A human had slain a trial beast. The princess covered her mouth, her silver eyes wide with relief. But the king's face hardened. This was not what he wanted. Not proof of weakness, but proof of danger. If a human could outsmart his trials, what else could he do? The last beast still stood, circling Daniel with hatred in its eyes. Daniel's chest heaved, his body almost broken. but he forced himself to rise, gripping the chain tighter. The beast roared and charged. At the last moment, Daniel leapt aside. Wrapping the chain around its neck, he pulled with everything left in him. The chain cut deep, the monster thrashed, fire spilling from its jaws until at last it collapsed in silence. For one long breath, the arena was quiet. Then voices thundered, some chanting his survival, others calling for his death. The human had done the impossible. He had beaten the fire trial. The princess rose, her voice strong enough to cut through the storm. He is not weak, he is not prey, he is clever. And he is alive. Her words echoed through the arena, and for the first time, some nobles bowed their heads in silence. The king's eyes narrowed like blades. He leaned forward, his voice low, filled with warning, alive, yes, but dangerous. And in that single word, Daniel's fate was sealed. That night, the city whispered of the trial. Some called him a monster slayer, some called him a threat. The princess knew the truth. Her world would never see him as harmless again. And Daniel himself knew that every victory only painted a larger target on his back. The trial had been fire, but the real fire was still coming. And its flames would burn through the empire. The city did not sleep after the trial. Every corner, every hall, every market whispered the same story. The human had survived. He had faced the beasts of fire and lived. Some called it luck, some called it madness, but others called it a sign. Daniel walked through the palace under heavy guard. Chains no longer bound his wrists, yet he felt them in his heart. Eyes followed him, sharp and filled with judgment. Children pointed from balconies. Merchants muttered in alleys. Soldiers gripped their spears tighter. He was not invisible anymore, he was too visible. The princess kept close to him, her presence the only shield he had. Her words had saved him in the arena, but her father's silence was darker than any threat. The king had not punished Daniel yet, nor had he released him. That waiting was more dangerous than any beast. At night, Daniel sat in the garden of crystal trees. The air shimmered with silver light. Leaves hummed softly like a distant song. He closed his eyes, remembering earth, the smell of rain, the voices of friends he might never see again. His heart ached, but he could not break. Not here, not now. A shadow moved among the trees. Daniel stood quickly, gripping a broken branch as a weapon. A voice whispered from the dark, soft and urgent. Do not fear, human. We are not your enemy. Figures stepped forward, cloaked in gray, their faces hidden behind masks of stone. Daniel tensed, but the princess appeared at his side, her eyes narrowing. Rebels, she said in her language, and the translation device hummed. Daniel frowned. Rebels? Against who? The leader lowered his hood, his eyes burning with fire. Against the king, against the chains, against the empire that fears change. The princess's lips tightened, her voice sharp. You dare step into the royal garden? The rebel bowed not to her crown, but to her heart. We dare because we see the truth. Princess, you protect him, you see what he means. And so do we. Daniel's chest tightened. The rebel leader turned his gaze on him. You are proof that respect is stronger than fear, that cleverness defeats power. Your survival has shaken the throne. The rebels' voices grew louder, their whispers crawling through the night air. Join us, human, stand with us. And the world will change. The princess stepped between them, her eyes blazing. No, he is not your symbol. He is not your weapon. The rebel leader did not flinch, his words like knives. Whether you wish it or not, princess, he already is. Daniel felt the weight of their words press on him. He had not asked for this, he only wanted to live, but now, his survival was more than survival. It was fire spreading in dry grass, a fire he could not control. The rebels vanished into the night. Leaving only silence, the princess looked at Daniel, her silver eyes filled with worry. They will not stop. They will whisper your name in the streets. They will raise your image as their banner. Daniel shook his head. I never wanted this. Her hand touched his arm gently. That does not matter. Sometimes destiny chooses you. The next day, the court was louder than ever, nobles argued, voices sharp and bitter. The human is dangerous, they cried. He must be destroyed. Others whispered of using him, twisting his fame for their own gain. The king sat silent on his throne, his eyes cold, listening, measuring, waiting. The princess spoke once, her voice clear. He is no threat, he is only different. It is our fear that makes him dangerous. But her words fell like water on stone. The nobles laughed, the generals snarled, and in the shadows, assassins sharpened their blades. That night, Daniel tried to sleep, but the silence was too heavy. He turned, and his breath caught. A figure stood at the foot of his bed, a blade glimmering in the dark. The assassin moved swift as shadow, but Daniel rolled aside. The blade cutting through the sheets, he grabbed a stool, swinging wildly. The wood cracked against the assassin's arm. The fight was silent but fierce. Steel clashed against wood. Breath against fear, Daniel stumbled, his heart pounding, his throat dry. The assassin's blade raised again, but before it could fall, silver light filled the room. The princess stood at the doorway, her hand raised, a crystal orb glowing in her palm. A flash of energy struck the assassin, throwing him against the wall. Guards rushed in, dragging the attacker away. But the damage was done. Daniel sat on the floor, shaking, sweat dripping from his face. The princess knelt beside him, her voice soft but sharp with anger. They will keep coming as long as you live. You are a threat to them, but you are also hope to others. Her hand lingered on his shoulder, firm and steady. You must decide, Daniel. Are you only surviving, or are you ready to fight? Daniel looked into her eyes, and for the first time, he saw not only kindness but fire. He thought of earth, of freedom, of respect. His chest rose with a long breath, and though fear still wrapped around him, he whispered, I'm ready. Outside, the city whispered louder than before. The human had survived beasts. He had survived blades, and now in the dark, a rebellion began to grow. It carried his name, his story, his bow of respect. The whispers had become shouts, and soon they would become war. The palace was a cage of whispers. Every corridor carried rumors. Every hall echoed with secrets. The human had survived trials, assassins and shadows, but now a greater storm was rising. It was not a beast of claws, but a beast of politics. The nobles argued without end. Kill him, some demanded. Before his name grows louder, use him, others suggested. Make him a tool for our power. The king listened, silent as stone, his cold eyes fixed on Daniel whenever he entered the court. But the princess was different. She no longer hid her feelings. Her voice carried strength, her gaze never left him. And that alone was dangerous. On the day of the moon festival, when the city gathered in the grand square, the princess stood before thousands, her robe shimmering like silver fire. Daniel stood behind her, his heart pounding. He thought he was only there as a prisoner, a curiosity, but the princess had another plan. She raised her hand and silence fell across the square. Her voice echoed clear and sharp. My people, you fear the human, but you fear what you do not understand. Murmurs spread like waves, nobles hissed from the balconies. Still she pressed forward. He bows with respect. He fights with courage. He thinks with wisdom. And today before all of you I declare this truth. Her words cut like lightning. This human is not my prisoner, he is my chosen mate. The square exploded with sound. Shouts of outrage, cries of disbelief, gasps of horror. Nobles clutched their robes, soldiers tightened their spears. Even Daniel froze, his breath caught in his chest. Had she truly said it? Had she truly chosen him? The king rose from his seat, his face dark as storm clouds. His voice thundered, You shame your blood. You shame your crown. The princess's chin lifted, her silver eyes unshaken. I shame nothing, father, I choose with my heart. Not with your chains. Daniel felt the ground tremble. This was no simple declaration. This was rebellion with words. The people were divided. Some shouted for her courage. Others demanded her punishment, but the spark had been lit, and fire raced across the empire. That night the city burned with voices. Rebels painted Daniel's image on walls, whispering his name as a symbol of hope. Loyalists swore to crush him, calling him a disease brought from the stars. For the first time in centuries, the empire was breaking, not from outside, but from within. The princess came to Daniel's chamber, her face pale but her eyes filled with fire. You must understand, she whispered through the translator. There is no turning back now. I have chosen, and the world knows it. Daniel stared at her, his voice low. Why? Why risk everything? Her hand touched his cheek, gentle but firm. Because you are the first who saw me as more than crown. Because I would rather fight for truth than live in chains of lies. The war began quietly at first. Whispers in alleys, stolen weapons, hidden banners. Then it grew louder. Rebel cells attacked supply lines. Soldiers vanished in the night. Loyalists marched through the streets, hunting anyone who spoke the human's name. Daniel found himself in the center of it all. He was no longer only a survivor. Rebels begged him to lead, to teach them, To show them human ways of war, he shook his head at first, but when he saw their eyes full of hope, full of belief, he could not refuse. He taught them patience. Do not charge without thought. Do not waste lives for pride. Use shadows, use traps, fight with the mind. Not only with the blade, at night, rebels struck and vanished like smoke. Loyalist generals grew angry. Frustrated, afraid, for the first time, alien warriors faced tactics they did not understand. But the cost was heavy. Each victory drew blood. Each ambush left scars. Daniel carried guilt, yet the rebels carried faith. They called him the Clever Flame, a name that spread faster than any soldier could chase. The princess stood beside him through every moment. When nobles cursed her, she stood taller. When soldiers doubted, she raised their spirits with calm words. Together, human and princess became the heart of the rebellion. But hearts are fragile, and enemies know where to strike. One evening, as the rebels gathered in secret caves beneath the city, a messenger rushed in, breathless, his face pale. "The warlord," he gasped. "The king's promised son-in-law. He comes with a fleet. He demands the human's head. He demands your surrender." The room grew cold, the princess's face hardened. But Daniel saw the fear in her eyes. This was no simple rival. This was the Empire's strongest weapon. A warlord who commanded legions. A man who saw the princess not as a woman but as property. And now Daniel stood between him and his prize. The rebels murmured with unease. "We cannot fight his fleet. We cannot match his power." Daniel's hand tightened into a fist, his voice steady. "Then we will not fight his way. We will fight ours, not with strength, but with cleverness, not with numbers, but with will." The princess placed her hand over his, her eyes glowing with trust. "Love or war, Daniel," she whispered. "This is where we choose." He met her gaze, his heart heavy but strong. "Then we choose both," he said. And the night trembled with the weight of war yet to come. The sky burned red with the arrival of the warlord's fleet. Giant ships of black iron floated above the city, their shadows swallowing towers of crystal. The ground shook as their engines roared, and the people trembled. The warlord had come, and with him war itself. Daniel stood on the balcony of the rebel hideout. Staring at the ships, he felt small. Like an ant beneath a storm, the rebels whispered in fear. Some ready to flee, others ready to die. The princess stood beside him, her silver eyes calm but sharp. "This is it," she said, "the final trial. Not of beasts, not of fire, but of hearts." The warlord entered the city like thunder, armored from head to toe, his body huge and scarred, his eyes glowing with red fire. He rode a beast of steel, and behind him marched thousands. Soldiers slammed their weapons against the ground. Chanting his name, the king rose from his throne to greet him. But the warlord ignored his words. He pointed his blade at Daniel, his voice like stone breaking. "Give me the human, give me the thief of respect, and I will spare your people." The court froze, all eyes on the king. The king's lips tightened. Torn between pride and fear, the princess stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. "No, he is mine. Chosen by me, not you, not father, not anyone." The warlord's eyes narrowed, his voice dripping with rage. "Then you choose war." The city became a battlefield. Rebels clashed with loyalists, fire lit the night. Crystal towers cracked and fell. Daniel moved among them. Not as a soldier, but as a guide. "Do not fight their strength," he told the rebels. "Break their lines, cut their supply, make them chase shadows." Every trap they laid, every ambush they planned, came from his human mind. And slowly, piece by piece, the warlord's endless army began to stumble. But the warlord himself was unstoppable. He cut through rebels like fire through paper. His blade heavy as thunder, he roared Daniel's name, promising death with every swing. Fear spread like poison. Hope began to crack. The princess refused to give in. She rode at the front of the rebels, her banner high, her voice sharp as steel. "With respect we fight, with hope we rise," she cried. Her soldiers followed her, hearts burning brighter than fear. In the final clash, the rebels cornered the warlord's forces near the palace gates. But the warlord himself stood tall, his armor glowing with blood-red light. He looked at Daniel, his laughter cold and cruel. "You human, you think clever tricks can defeat true power? Come face me and die as you should have long ago." Daniel knew he could not match the warlord's strength, but he also knew he did not need to. He stepped forward, chain in his hand, eyes steady. "I don't need to be stronger," he said. "I only need to be smarter." The warlord charged, blade raised high. Daniel dodged, pulling him toward the broken palace wall. The rebels had rigged the ground with fire powder and crystal shards. Daniel gave the signal and the trap ignited. Flames exploded beneath the warlord's feet, smoke covering the battlefield. The giant stumbled, his armor cracked. His blade struck stone instead of flesh. Daniel swung the chain, wrapping it around the warlord's arm. He pulled with all his strength, guiding him straight into the collapsing wall. The ground shook as the warlord fell. Pinned beneath burning stone, his roar turned to silence. His blade shattered, the battlefield froze. Every soldier staring in disbelief, the human had done what none had dared. He had defeated the warlord. Silence stretched. Then the rebels shouted in triumph. "Daniel, Daniel, the clever flame," they cried. Even some loyalist soldiers dropped their weapons, bowing not to fear, but to respect. The king's face turned pale, his throne no longer a shield. The people's eyes had shifted. The world had changed. The princess stepped beside Daniel. Her silver hand in his, she raised it high for all to see, her voice carrying across the ruined square. "Respect is stronger than fear. Kindness is stronger than cruelty. This human has shown us the way." The crowd roared, louder than any fleet, louder than any throne. That night, the fires of war cooled. The rebels and loyalists who survived stood together. Uncertain but hopeful, the warlord was gone. The king's power broken, and in his place rose something new. Not a human empire, not an alien one, but a bond between them. Daniel sat beside the princess on the palace steps. He looked at the stars. Wondering if Earth could see him now, he whispered, "I was just polite." The princess smiled, her silver eyes soft. And that politeness changed a world. From that day, the story spread across the galaxy of a human who bowed, of a princess who chose love over chains, of an empire that feared respect, yet fell to it. It was not strength, not weapons, not power, but the simple truth that kindness, respect, and cleverness could be stronger than fear. And in every corner of the universe where humans and aliens crossed paths, they remembered the story of the princess and the human, and they whispered one phrase with awe and hope: "Humans are special,